Chapter 19. Narrative resumed by Jim Hawkins. The Garrison in the Stockade. As soon as Ben Gunn saw the colors, he came to a halt, stopped me by the arm, and sat down. "Now," says he, "there's your friend, sure enough." "Far more likely it's the mutineers," I answered. "That," he cried, "why, in a place like this, where nobody puts in but gentlemen's of fortune, silver would fly, the Jolly Roger, you don't make no doubt of that. No, that's your friends. There's been blows too, and I reckon your friends has had the best of it, and here they are ashore in the old stockade, as was made years and years ago by Flint. Ah, he was the man to have a headpiece, was Flint, barring rum match were never seen, he were afraid of none, not he, only Silver. Silver was a genteel." "Well," I said, "that may be so, and so be it, all the more reason that I should hurry and join my friends." "Nay, mate," returned Ben, "not you, you're a good boy, or I mistook, but you're only a boy and told. Now, Ben Gunn is fly, rum wouldn't bring me there. Where you're going, not rum wouldn't, till I see you born gentleman and gets it on his word of honor. And you won't forget my words, a precious sight, that's what they'll say. A precious sight more confidence." And then nips him. And he pinched me the third time with the same air of cleverness. "And when Ben Gunn is wanted, you know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today. And him that comes is to have White Thing in his hand, and he's to come alone. Oh, and you'll say this, Ben Gunn, says you, has reasons of his own." "Well," I said, "I believe I understand. You have something to propose, and you wish to see the squire or the doctor, and you're to be found where I found you. Is that all?" "And when, says you," he added. "Why, from about noon observation to about 6 bells. "Good," said I. "And now may I go?" "You won't forget?" he inquired anxiously. "Precious sight, and reasons of his own, says you. Reasons of his own, that's the mainstay, and between man and man. Well then," still holding me, "I reckon you can go, Jim. And Jim, if you was to see silver, you wouldn't go for the Selborne gun. Wild horses wouldn't draw you from it? No, says you. And if them pirates camp ashore, Jim, what would you say but there'll be whalers in the morning?" Here he was interrupted by a loud report, and a cannonball came tearing through the trees and pitched in the sand not 100 yards from where we two were talking. The next moment each of us had taken to his heels in a different direction. For a good hour to come, frequent reports shook the island, and balls kept crashing through the woods. I moved from hiding place to hiding place, always pursued, or so it seemed to be, by these terrifying missiles. But towards the end of the bombardment, though still I durst not venture in the direction of the stockade where the balls fell off nest, I had begun in a manner to pluck my heart again, and after a long detour to the east, I crept down among the shore-side trees. The sun had just set. Sea breeze was rustling and tumbling into the woods and ruffling the gray surface of the anchorage. The tide, too, was far out, and the great tracts of sand lay uncovered. The air, after the heat of the day, chilled me through my jacket. The Hispaniola lay where she had anchored, but, sure enough, there was the Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy flying from her peak. Even as I looked, there came another red flash and another report that set the echoes clattering, and one more round shot whistled through the air, and it was the last of the cannonade. I lay for some time watching the bustle while succeeding in the attack. Men were demolishing something with axes on the beach near the stockade. The poor jolly boat I afterwards discovered. Away, near the mouth of the river, a great fire was glowing among the trees, and between this point and the point of the ship, one of the gigs kept coming and going, the men whom I had seen so gloomy, shouting oars like children. But there was a sound in the voices which suggested rum. At length, I thought, I might return toward the stockade. I was pretty far down on the low, sandy spit that encloses an anchorage to the east, and is joined at half water to Skeleton Island. And now, as I rose to my feet, I saw some distance further down the spit, rising from among the low bushes, an isolated rock pretty high and peculiarly white in color. It occurred to me that this might be the White Rock of which Ben Gunn had spoke, and that some day or other a boat might be wanted, and I should know where to look for one. Then I skirted among the woods until I had regained the rear and shoreward side of the stockade, and was soon warmly welcomed by the faithful party. I had soon told my story and began to look about me. The log house was made of honest square trunks of pine, roof, walls, and floor. The latter stood in several places as much as a foot or a foot and a half above the surface of the sand. There was a porch at the door, and under this porch the little spring welled up into the artificial basin of a rather odd kind, no other than the ship's kettle of iron, with the bottom knocked out and sunk to her bearings, as the captain said, among the sand. Little had been left besides the framework of the house, but in one corner there was a stone slab laid down in the way of the hearth, and an old rusty iron basket to contain the fire. The slopes of the knoll and the inside of the stockade had been cleared of timber to build the house, and we could see by the stumps what a fine and lofty grove had been destroyed. Most of the soil had been washed away and buried in drift after the removal of the trees. Only where the stream that ran down from the kettle, a thick bed of moss and some ferns and a little creeping bushes were still green among the sand, very close around the stockade, too close for defense, they said, and the woods still flourished in high and dense, all the fir in the land, but towards the sea, with a large admixture of live oaks. The cold evening breeze, of which I had spoken, whistled through every chink of the rude building and sprinkled the floor with continual rain of fine sand. There was sand in our eyes, sand in our teeth, sand in our suppers, sand dancing in the spring at the bottom of the kettle. For all the world like porridge beginning to boil, our chimney was a square hole in a roof. It was but a little part of the smoke that had found its way out of the rest, eddied about the house and kept coughing and piping the eye. Add to this that Gray, the new man, had had his face tied up in a bandage for a cut that had gotten breaking away from the mutineers, and the poor old Tom Redruth, still unburied, lay among a wall, stiff and stark under the Union Jack. If we had been allowed to sit idle, we would have fallen in the blues, but Captain Smollett was never the man for that. All hands were called up before him as he divided us into watches. The doctor, Gray, and I for one, the squire and Hunter, and Joyce for another. Tired though we all were, 2 were sent out for firewood, 2 more were set a dig to Grave Redruth. The doctor was named cook, and I was put sentry to the door, and the captain himself went from one to another, keeping our spirits and lending a hand wherever it was wanted. From time to time the doctor would come to the door for a little air and to rest his eyes, which were almost smoked out of his head, and whenever he did so, he had a word for me. "That man Smollett," he once said, "is a better man than I am, and when I say it, I mean it. Deal, Jim." Another time he came and was silent for a while. Then he put his head on one side and looked at me. "Is this Ben Gunn man?" he asked. "I don't know, sir," said I, "for I am not very sure whether he is sane." "If there's any doubt about this matter, he is," returned the doctor. "A man who has been there 3 years biting his nails on the desert island. Jim, I can't expect to appear as sane as you or me. It does not lie in human nature. Was it cheese you said he had a fancy for?" "Yes, sir, cheese," I answered. "Well, Jim," says he, "just see and the good that comes of being dainty in your food. You've seen my snuff box, haven't you? And you've never saw me take a snuff. The reason being that by snuff box I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese, a cheese made in Italy, very nutritious. Well, that's for Ben Gunn." Before supper was eaten, we buried old Tom in the sand and stood round him for a while, bareheaded in the breeze. A good deal of firewood had been got in, but not enough for the captain's fancy, and he shook his head over it and told us we must get back to this tomorrow rather livelier. Then, when we had eaten our pork, and each had a good stiff glass of brandy grog, the 3 chiefs got together in the corner to discuss our prospects. It appears they were at their wits' end with what to do, the stores being so low that we must have starved into surrender long before help came. But our best hope, it was decided, was to kill off the buccaneers until they either hauled down their flag or ran away with the Hispaniola. From 19 they were already reduced to 15. 2 others were wounded, and one at least, the man shot beside the gun, severely wounded, if he were not dead. Every time we had a crack at them, we were to take it, saving our own lives with the extremest care. But, besides that, we had 2 able allies, Rum and Climate. As for the first, though we were about half a mile away, we could hear them roaring and singing late into the night, and as for the second, the doctor staked his wig that, can't, were they were in the marsh and unprovided with remedies, and half of them would be on their backs before a week. So, he added, if we are not all shot First, they'll be glad to be packing in the schooner. I'd always a ship, and they can get a buccaneering again, I suppose. First ship they ever lost, said Captain Smollett. I was dead tired, as you may fancy, and when I got to sleep, which was not till after a great deal of tossing, I slept like a log of wood. The rest had been long up and had already breakfasted and increased a pile of firewood by about half as much again. When I was wakened by a bustle of sound and voices, "Flag a truce!" I heard someone say, and then immediately after, with a cry of surprise, "Silver himself!" And at that I jumped up, rubbing my eyes, and ran to a loophole in the wall.